Welcome to the Rabbi and The Shrink. This is Dr. Margarita Gurri, the Shrink, and my favorite rabbi,
Yonason Goldson.
Today we're doing something different. We're talking about free will and accountability. The good rabbi and I have had the privilege of talking with some amazing minds and hearts, and we keep coming back to some of the excuses people give themselves, and maybe even we give ourselves from time to time, about what is really up to us and what isn't, and are we held accountable? So, Rabbi, let's start with you. I always love your stories and your point of view on things. What do you think about free will?
Well, it's a topic that came up very often when I taught high school.
I'm sure it did.
Particularly since I taught Jewish studies and theology, and it is a cornerstone of Jewish belief. And I would try to get my students riled up by telling them that their pet dog has no free will. And they would often get miffed. Yes, he does. Yes, she does. Because if I give them this kind of a biscuit and that kind of a biscuit, they'll always take this kind of biscuit. They're choosing which biscuit they want. And I would explain that's not a choice. That's an internal programming. One of them is more attractive. And so they go for the one that's more attractive because they are programmed to do that. There's no inner, they're not looking at the box asking themselves, well, which one has more calories? And is it worth me to pass up the one that tastes better for the more nutritious one? That doesn't go through a dog's mind. It's simply what it's programmed to respond to. And human beings are different. We can make evaluations. We can make our pro and con list. We can evaluate the choices that are available to us. And we can make self-indulgent choices, or we can make informed choices that are in our long-term best interest. And ultimately, and we'll get into this more, it's the struggle between those options that is really the indication of genuine free will. I'm sure that has a psychological component that you'd hone in on as well.
Yeah, it does. And I like that. I also, you didn't share the part of the story that I love the most, the part of that story where you tell them their dog doesn't love them.
Well, I don't want to be too controversial.
I love that you rile your students up to incite them to thinking.
I'll talk about any of the hot topics today, but talk about people's pets. I mean, people are so emotional.
I know. And honestly, I had to laugh because that's something my big brother might have told me, is your dog doesn't love you. I mean, just to rile me. So I think we're not trying to say anything just to rile people up. I just love that he said that and and everyone respected him enough to listen to what is this man saying now. Psychologically speaking, the idea of free will gets into my mind because a lot of people want to surrender. They want to do a trust fall. I have free will, but my free will is to surrender to God's will. And so it's all up to God. It's in God's hands or the universe or whoever is there. So I'm going to do a trust fall and fall. And it's not up to me because I've already made a high order decision that it's not mine, not me, and I give up. I think that is a dangerous, well, I know that that's a dangerous choice to make. And as a dangerous point of view.
And it actually comes from a very deep and challenging theological dilemma, the conflict or the paradox between free will and predestination. If God has a plan for the world, then how can I possibly change it? How can I possibly be in control? If God knows the future and knows what I'm going to do, how can I have any control over my actions? Now, this isn't really the forum to get into that, but there are answers to those questions. And as you say, the abdication of free will, it's kind of interesting because you're saying the person who says, well, I'm giving up my free will. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the biologists who will say there is no free will. We're just a packet of neurons and genetics and maybe experiences that have shaped us and we merely react to our environment and to stimuli according to our prior programming. We're really no different from the dog who's choosing the biscuit that's attractive to it. Either way, this is an abdication of responsibility. If I'm not really choosing, I'm not really responsible for my actions. And that creates a whole different problem. How can we have courts? How can we have laws? How can we have penal system?
And how can you make any plans? I mean, one of my favorite conversations about free will and its limits came from a discussion I had with a high school student that was a magician. And we got to talking about free will in a class. I was doing a drug and alcohol class. And we got to talk about, are you pre-programmed in your brain to be an alcoholic, to be a drug addict? So if I take some of alcohol and someone else takes some of alcohol, that person may become an alcoholic or not because of their brain. So we got into esoteric discussions and brain topics, and we were exploring all the possibilities. And then the student comes up and says, I believe that since I'm a magician, I know about the brain. The brain wants to be lazy. It wants to do what's easy. And if I know what the brain wants, I can get people to see things the way I want them to see it. So if I have cards in front of me and I say, hand me one, I know right-handed people will hand me probably the third card facing them, and left-handed the second one because it's the easiest. I mean, I had never thought of that. My mind was blown with that. And then he went on and on to talk about all sorts of things of free will, including then what we end up as a group deciding that one of the issues that limits free will, for those of us who believe in free will, and I do, we're limited by our awareness of how we are influenced and how influenceable we are by things such as our programming, our dog brain, our human brain, bias, visual cues, our mood, our fears, our pre-programming culturally or whatever. Do we ever really see everything that's there? So our idea of free will then requires those of us who hold on to the fact we do indeed have free will, and we're going to use it to make the world a better place for ourselves and our loved ones and the greater world, is that we have to live an examined life, which is what you and I are talking about all the time with ethics. You have to ask yourself how, if at all, I am being influenced. What are those influences? What is the impact of that influence? And if we don't ask those questions, we're not actually operating from true free will.
And I think that's where free will really comes into play. I mean, the
Yes.
buzzword of today is mindfulness. And that's exactly what it means to ask ourselves those questions. You know, yes, we all have unconscious biases. We all have them. How do we deal with them? It's by making them conscious, by asking ourselves, what's actually motivating me here? What's lying beneath the surface that's influencing my actions? Because the more conscious of them I become, the less influence they have over me. And the willingness to take a look at ourselves. You know, you use this example of the mind is lazy. That's true. The body's lazy too. So why are there so many people at the gym? Right? I mean, who wants to be sweating and huffing and puffing and being sore and picking up big pieces of iron and putting them down again and running in place and going nowhere? I mean, why would any rational person do this? Because we understand that we are making our bodies healthier.
Yes.
By engaging in this type of behavior. And the more we do it, the easier it gets. After a while, you move up to heavier weights and you turn the resistance up on the elliptical or the treadmill because you've gotten stronger. And the brain is exactly the same way. When we use it, it gets stronger. When we don't use it, it gets weaker and flabbier. And so we can abdicate free will simply by being lazy. And eventually we will become slaves to our own habits. You know, there's theologically, people question, how could God harden Pharaoh's heart? Well, if you read scripture carefully, the first 5 plagues, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. And at some point, God says to him, you've chosen the path you want to go. I'm now going to make sure you take it all the way to the end. But Pharaoh had choice in the beginning. He didn't have to do the things he did. He made those choices, and eventually he had to live with them. And it's the same way for us.
And unfortunately, taking that into a more modern world, a lot of times we say, well, you gave me no choice.
Mm.
You know, you made me. So my favorite is when my two daughters were young, one of them said, it's not my fault she made me hit her. And I always laugh about that, but it's really not funny when it's grown-ups doing it. And so the whole issue is to be gracious enough to know that we are influenced. Of course we're influenced. I have an identical twin sister. You had brought up a topic of identical twins. I have an identical twin. We were different from birth. So the people that say your genetics determine your choices. Well, obviously, some of our genetics determine some of our choices. We're going to like these foods more than others because of our taste buds and whatever, you know, and how our tummy feels when we eat them, if we're allergic or not. I mean, there's so many influences that we may consider to be free will if we just float with it. So free will is not a preference. Free will goes beyond preference to really examining things to make choices that are hard to make. I don't think free will lives in an easy place. It's not a flamingo float on a beautiful pool on a nice sunny day.
No, in fact, it's a battle, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you reminded me. You reminded me of when I was growing up. One of my favorite comics was Flip Wilson.
Yes, I remember him.
And you remember one of his famous lines is, "The devil made me do it."
Right.
Right. I think a former president said something very similar in one of his memoirs. You know, it's the devil doesn't make us do anything. The devil tempts us. In fact, in Hebrew, the word Satan, pronounced Satan in Hebrew, it means an adversary, an opponent. And what's the point of having an opponent? If you're training to be a boxer, you spar with an opponent. If you're learning martial arts, you spar with an opponent. It makes you, that's how you learn to become a master.
Right.
And temptation is an opportunity for us to summon our better angels.
Absolutely.
And if we do, we're choosing to resist temptation. If we don't, we are choosing to give in to temptation. But when I say it's a battle, one of the classic discussions of this in Jewish thought is by Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. And he says that life is like a battlefield. There's conquered territory, and there's territory we're trying to conquer. And the conquered territory are the habits that we've developed, and the unconquered territory are the skills, the aspirations that we're trying to achieve and to acquire. And that some things are going to be out of reach right now because I'm simply not there yet. And other things are going to be relegated to the past. I don't have to struggle getting out of bed on time in the morning. I did at one point in my life. It's not a struggle anymore because I have conditioned myself. I set the alarm, it rings, I get up. There's no struggle involved there. But there was at one time. So what's changed? I've changed. Because the struggle happens on the battlefront. Wherever I am right now, wherever I'm poised evenly between what my impulses compel me to do and what my convictions tell me I should do. As soon as you have an even match there, that's where free will takes place. And the sign that it's free will is that it's a struggle. When we feel ourselves struggling, that's the proof of our free will. And if we push ourselves, that point is going to change. It's going to move forward. If we don't push ourselves, it's going to slip backwards.
And I have developed a model for looking at mindfulness, which for me represents the daily struggle with that temptation or with the conflict. And it's about re-examining. And I believe there's 3 times in our struggle where we're really more susceptible to making gains or to losing ground. So if you're talking about a battlefield, and it's when we're totally aware and in this headspace where we're living an examined life and we're with other people who do it, and we've created this environment that we're trying to be aware of ourselves and others and the environments in which we find ourselves. That kind of discerning, sentient look. And then the other 2 times is when we're struggling. Either we're struggling to do good or we're struggling because we want to do bad. Either of those 2 struggles, and I'm putting it in a simple way just to make it easier. So whether you believe in the God or not, or you believe in the devil or not, obviously you're an Orthodox man. I am a Catholic woman. So obviously we are 2 people of faith. But many of the people we know do not believe in God or the devil or angels. That's a separate issue. Because the mindfulness is something that if we decide we have the courage to take a look at that and have partners in our lives, like I know I can call you anytime and say, hey, I'm struggling with this dilemma. Could you help me think it through? You're not going to tell me what to do, but you help me think it through. And I have my twin sister I can talk to at any time, and her husband, and my friends, the Wetters, my children. My children always have an opinion about what I'm doing, so I can always ask them. And even my grandchildren now, they're teaching me with their eye rolls. All right. So there's always someone to help you lead a more examined life.
I think that's a great point, because I remember what that very successful game show was, where you have a lifeline.
Yes, it's the lifeline.
And that's a very real device. Because if I feel that I'm struggling, maybe I'm right in the moment. It's so easy now that we have cell phones. I could call you up. I could call up one of my trusted advisors and say, I'm really struggling like this. I'm in the heat of the moment. Help me get a reality check.
And maybe you and I are struggling but don't know it. Maybe we've had some ethical fading and we've gotten used to something that's, grappling with the gray less successfully. That's when our friends or the people that are advisors that we've chosen will call us and say, I'm worried about how you're thinking about this. Or I'm worried that you're thinking about doing X, Y, or Z. Let's talk about it.
I posted a video this week, one of my ethics videos, and in the comments, somebody challenged me that my content was not ethical.
Really? What was their point?
That I was presenting one side of the argument and not the other.
Okay.
Which I was.
And how is that unethical?
Well, because as we've been through many times, until you see both sides of the issue, you don't have a clear picture. I was doing it as satire, but I'm willing to entertain the possibility that maybe I've crossed a line. Maybe I need to reconsider whether this is an appropriate format. I've actually scheduled a panel discussion to actually talk about that issue.
That's great. See, I think that especially when we're in the world of ethics, I think sometimes we know where our hearts and souls are and our minds. And so we assume other people know it. And we may not represent ourselves in a way that looks more balanced. And I like when I get criticism for my point of view, because I'm thinking, this is how someone's looking at it. What have I missed? How can I continue to present this in a way that is more compelling, that reaches more people in a way that they'll ask themselves rather than just refute what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us, all of us, to say, what have I missed?
Yeah, because we all make mistakes. We all miscalculate.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have this what do you say? How do you call it? Describe it. You have 3 different criteria.
It's called Big Red Couch, right? It's my mindfulness model.
Yeah. So I spend every morning after my morning prayers, I spend a few minutes reading, studying on self-development, self-improvement. And literally just this morning, not in preparation for this class, but it just happened. That's where I was in the text. Classic work called The Path of the Just, where the author talks about 3 steps to take in making the right choices.
Ooh, I'd love a link of that.
And well, it's very simple. The first is to objectively evaluate what's good, what's evil, what's right, what's wrong, what's ethical, what's not ethical, in a sort of universalistic sense. Not when we're in the heat of the moment, but just to calibrate our moral compass. Then when we find ourselves at the time of decision making, to take those insights and those understandings that we've acquired and apply them to the specific situation. And then afterwards to feel, to sense, was how did that feel? I made a logical choice that it was the right thing to do. Sometimes it still feels wrong after the fact. And by having this sort of process of developing ethical principles, reasoning out ethical choices, and then intuiting the choices afterwards, we go through life like that, we're going to be raising the bar consistently throughout the course of our lives.
I agree. And you've addressed then one of my other pet peeves is that people think, well, that feels right. So if it feels right and it goes with my instinct, it must be right. Well, no, not necessarily. It might be.
Often not.
It might be. It might just be this is what I'm wishing is right. So I think that examining things, even if we know in our hearts they're true and real and right and just and kind, I think we have to re-examine. Now, people accuse us all the time of being biased because we both come from a religious point of view. And you're going to be biased about some things because you're an Orthodox man who has certain faith. And you believe certain things, whether it's about men and women or God and behavior and whatever. And I have certain faith. So we're going to be accused of prejudice. And maybe it is prejudice. Maybe it is bias. But it is a point of view. So my point is, we're never going to get everyone to say you're not being biased. The point is living an examined life and being able to have conversations with people who are annoyed with us for our point of view and learn from them and examine, have I missed this? What can I include? Some people are just not logical. And so helping them think things through may not be a successful endeavor. Some people's readiness is delayed or absent, and maybe later they'll get it, maybe they won't, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's one of my great frustrations in life that when you engage somebody I shouldn't say it that way, who is speaking emotionally.
Yes.
The worst thing you can do is speak to them logically.
Yeah, or point out that they're being illogical, which feels patronizing and yucky. I mean,
They just double down.
Yeah, learning the skills needed to invite logic into a conversation is a challenge. And I think all of us must do that.
Yeah, one of my rabbis like to say, man is I should make it politically correct. Human beings are psychological, not logical creatures.
Yeah, that's true, actually. But I think that we can aim to master logical arguments. Maybe we never make a logical decision because maybe it's complicated, but mastering the arguments and having cogent points and updating our opinions. And we can't just say that. One of the things that you and I've talked about that I'll speak for myself, but I believe you agree with me. I was very disappointed with some of the debates that we've had in the political arena, because I think that if we have bright minds who love our country, can't we listen to each other and speak in such a way that's civil and shares information rather than tears other people down or slams them in the cancel culture? I'm taking my base home and you can't play with me anymore. I mean, I think that you and I are trying to call people to action to do a better job of really listening and understanding ourselves and others.
Yeah, and then it's interesting when you study the beginnings of this country, and I mean it's extraordinary that the brilliance of the minds of the men who started the United States. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, I would say God put all these people together in one time, in one place to create something that had never been conceived or enacted before. But they were still human beings, and they were passionate, and they were not always civil the way we might hope they would be. They were not always ethical or moral,
no,
the way we might hope they would be. But they were operating from points of view that were so soundly reasoned And that's something that we're not seeing a lot of today.
No,
We're
not
seeing
consistently.
people holding positions because they feel right.
Yes.
And there's another point that's worth making here. And this is an idea that I've just been introduced to recently. There are apparently 5 categories of personalities. You probably know this better than I do, like openness and agreeableness and orderliness. And a person who is strong in orderliness is more likely to be politically conservative. And a person who is more naturally open is going to be more inclined to be more liberal politically. So then, if I have that predisposition, and then I live in a home where my parents happen to be of that same mind and reinforce it, and then I go and I find peers that I'm attracted to who have the same predisposition, and then I go to a university where I encounter more of the same. Well, I haven't really chosen my political instincts.
Nope.
I've simply been led in a direction by a combination of nature and environment. But then it goes back to your point. How mindful are we?
Yes.
Because as soon as I make myself aware that I have these predispositions and I make a conscious decision to try to understand the other side, at least now I can restore some kind of balance of free will. But if I don't do that, then I really am a slave to my impulses and my environment.
You are. And it's not the kind of listening where I'm listening to you so I can then refute the point.
Right.
It's true listening, which takes a lot of patience and courage, because some people just have ideas that we think are so wrong and crazy, and I'm not listening to that. But trying to understand that has made my life richer. It doesn't mean that we're going to befriend those people. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll come to a meeting of the minds, but they do have something to teach us. My brother used to say, listen to the people who you disagree with. My big brother Joe, and you will learn more about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And my father used to say, go to meetings and hopefully you'll find someone that you disagree with what they say totally, and you don't like how they're presenting it, and you're going to have the best education possible, because you'll know that's not how you want to come across or how you want to teach. So that take it as a blessing, really, the people who are out there. And I'm sure when I'm wrong, I'm teaching people things too.
Yeah, and the Yale professor Stephen L. Carter, who's written some wonderful books, Integrity and Civility, he introduced me to the concept of constructive disagreement. And when you put it in the political context, conservatives and liberals need each other. Because if you go back to the political philosophies of, say, Edmund Burke, who was claimed by both the liberals and the conservatives as one of the fathers of their movement, conservatism is basically a respect for tradition and convention, and liberalism is basically a desire to progress and improve. And how could you possibly?
But sometimes liberalism is just tearing down tradition.
Oh, that's sometimes, but you are right. And sometimes conservatism is just reactionaryism and calcification, right? And that's why they need each other.
Yes, I agree.
Because if we don't engage each other, then we will retreat into those stereotypic extremes that make us dangerous, that make compromise and finding common ground impossible. But if we engage, then we can keep each other honest, and we can chart a course that's going to be to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, you and I just did a podcast with David Hunsness, whose mission is to teach critical thinking. He's got critical thinking project. And I found that fascinating, because you and I can talk about all this forever, but the whole point is, how do we get this idea into the education system, one conversation at a time, one classroom at a time, one district at a time, one state at a time, so that we're all elevating, which is one of our goals, to elevate critical thinking. we elevate the expectations and the ability to, and the desire to really think things through. And I find that exciting that we know people who are doing concrete things that will make the world a better place.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the best professors I had in college, and there weren't a lot of them. I'm sorry to say, but there were a few. And probably the most influential was a professor I had in Shakespeare. And Shakespeare is a wonderful topic of study because there's so much couched in his narrative, in his drama, and his use of language is unlike any other writer. And you can just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And this professor did not stand in front of the class and pontificate. He challenged us to explain what was going on. And he encouraged us to argue with him.
Good.
If we didn't see his way of interpreting it. And I never had such a stimulating class in my college career.
Well, I'm glad that you had that. I mean, I think so many people, and it was smart that he did it on something that wasn't modern day, because then you're not canceling each other out. You're talking about something that was written in the past, and you're learning how to think and express and ask questions. I think
when I became a teacher, that was the style that I tried to use in the classroom. And for the most part, my students really found my classes valuable.
Did you tell him that you learned from him? Does he know?
I've tried to reach him. I was never able to get hold of him after.
I had two people that were very influential. Dr. Burgess, who is my psychology professor, and I did not want to be a psychologist. I was dead set against it. Many people in my family are psychiatrists, psychologists, and no, I didn't want to be one. And I got stuck with a Psych 101 class. She was brilliant. She asked questions. She had us observe people. She had us come up with her own answers and then taught us about the classics. It was exciting. I was on the edge of my seat. It was like that kind of book that you read and you can't wait to get to the end. I mean, she was, and I don't even remember her first name, but I tried to reach her to thank her. And the other one was a nun, Sister Paul Joseph. Now she's Sister Rita Baum. Back then, the nuns took men's name. And she, when people were being mean to me because I was a Cuban refugee and they were being harsh, and I started being harsh, she would ask me, is that who you want to become?
Yeah.
Why are they, I have a question for you. Why are they doing this to you? What are they thinking and feeling? What do they need? What is your job? And I had to laugh that she didn't scold me for wanting to hit them. I mean, they were hitting me and yelling and stuff. She didn't scold me for that. She just challenged me to be better than them and not let them set the tone. So part of free will is having the skills and the power to not just react to people, but to really think through how we're going to think, feel, and act in response to any situation. It's all a choice. Somebody
pointed out to me not long ago that response is the root of responsibility, which is an idea I really love. Yeah. But you just said something that I think is really critical to this conversation, that she asked you, whom do you want to become?
Yes.
And I think it all starts and maybe ends right there.
I think so too.
If I have a vision of myself and I'm willing to put the effort into becoming that. I mean, we do it with careers. We do it in the gym. Certainly we should do it in terms of the quality of who we are and the vision that we have for the type of person I want to be. I want to be the kind of person that other people are inspired by, that other people want to learn from, that other people want to be around. I want to attract people of quality, and that means I have to become a person of quality. And so with this story, you have really set up the word of the day, which is azimuth.
Okay, say that again, please.
Azimuth.
Okay.
All right. Azimuth is an arc of the horizon measured clockwise from South Point in astronomy or from North Point in navigation, but essentially what it is a bearing from where I am to where I want to get. So if I'm in gunnery, if I'm manning the howitzers, right? So I need an azimuth to be able to plot where the shell's going to land. If I'm navigating my way through unknown territory, right, I have to know where my destination is. You know, maybe you've heard me say this is one of my favorite studies I've ever heard. They blindfolded people and they asked them to walk a straight line. 100% of the time they ended up going in circles. And they didn't just limit it to walking. They asked people to swim a straight line. They put people in go-karts and asked them to drive a straight line. We always end up circling back to where we started. And they tried all sorts of things, and they could never figure out a pattern. It's not like you hear right-handed people go right, left-handed. No, there are no patterns. So how do you stay on track? Very simple. You keep your eye focused on a destination point. And if we know where we want to end up, then we can plot that azimuth. We can plot that course. We may have to take detours along the way, but we need the resolution to want to get there. And that is how free will can serve us.
What a great word. What a great word. And I think then we're circling back to the issue that many people believe that free will should be so natural and it should flow. But you and I are asserting that it is the struggle that is not only proof of free will, but the essential requirement to allow free will to have its most positive impact.
Yeah, one of my rabbis said, where there's no friction, there's no movement. We need something to push off against.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean we have to pick fights on purpose. The fights are there, the conflicts are there internally and externally. I mean, I think we have to really give ourselves a time. So you and I both do something in the morning that I don't know where you got the habit of examining things and doing some professional development. I got it from Sister Rita Baum. Every morning she says, as you're brushing your teeth, think about your day. Think about who you want to be. Think about yesterday and what did you learn from the mistakes you made, from the conflicts you had. Look at the things that were great and the things that weren't great and examine them, because that's where you're being guided. And then I have cleaner teeth. So there you go. And that's a professional development without a computer. But then, as grown-ups now, you and I both sit to the computer and do some professional development just about every day. Not only out of curiosity, but I do believe that if I don't keep asking questions, I'm going to begin to drink my own Kool-Aid and think that I'm beyond that. And none of us are ever beyond missing the boat.
Yeah, that's a really good expression to use here, the drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean,
Yeah.
those were, if anybody remembers, Jim Jones, the cult leader in Guyana, gave his followers Kool-Aid laced with, I'm not sure what kind of poison. And I think 900 or so of them essentially committed suicide, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But so the expression drinking the Kool-Aid means that you simply do what those around you are doing. We call it groupthink.
Or even your own Kool-Aid,
right.
Create your own dogma, your own whatever.
Yeah, and then once we do that, we've abdicated our free will.
We have. But free will, it comes at the price of some pain and the price of some creative and courageous thinking.
Like anything valuable in life.
Isn't that the truth? And as my brother used to say, if it's easy, why would we want it? So that was good. Rabbi, this has been fun. We need to do this more often.
I think we will. Yeah,
we'll pick different topics and we will talk about them. So this has been an episode on free will, the Rabbi and the Shrink. And check out some of our other episodes, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Rabbi and the Shrink, Everyday Ethics Unscripted. To book Dr. Red Shoe, Dr. Margarita Gurri, or Rabbi Yonason Goldson as speakers or advisors for your organization, contact them at therabbiandtheshrink.com. This has been a Dr. Red Shoe production.